Good afternoon and welcome to UnitedTV. My name is Kemal Erkan. Today is March 6, 2026, Friday. Today we are going to discuss one of the most sensitive and potentially consequential geopolitical tension of our time, the growing confrontation between Iran and Israel. At first glance, it may appear to be another regional dispute, long-standing adversaries, but in reality, the implications reach far beyond the Middle East. The region sits at the center of global energy routes, strategic alliance, and deeply rooted religious and political tension. Any serious escalation would not only impact Iran and Israel, it would send shockwaves through the global market and international politics and the stability of the multiple regions. Major powers such as Russia and China are watching closely, while countries like Turkey, positioned at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, must be more careful and navigate an increasing the complex landscape. In this increasing complex landscape, the real question is not simply who gains an advantage on the battlefield, but how this confrontation could reshape global power dynamics and whether the international community can prevent regional crisis before becoming something much larger. Today, we are going to explore these issues, and Phil is going to join me to ask important questions, and we are going to examine this new conflict that we have in our hand. Phil, how are you doing?
I'm good. Things have certainly changed since last time we sat in these seats. Definitely a lot to talk about.
Right. Every week is a lot more stuff happening.
It seems like that's the world we live in. But I think what you said is exactly the concern that many people have right now, that, you know, what appears to be a regional confrontation, at least geographically on the map, but it could have consequences that reach far beyond the Middle East. So why don't we start by kind of stepping back and looking at the big picture here. So when we look at the Iran, Israel, and now U.S. confrontation, is this still a regional conflict, or are we looking at something that could kind of reshape the global geopolitical balance?
So, well, it's an important question. So when you step back and analyze the dynamics already that's happening, it's very difficult to say that this is just pure isolated regional conflict. So this is already spread out. So I believe we can easily say that this is going to become a bigger,
they intend to show that they have resisted
in different regions.
A military onslaught from two of the world's most extraordinary militaries.
Anyway, so
ours and the Israelis. I think that's what the calculation now is. Regime preservation. Could you get a more pragmatic figure presiding over this regime?
Products that
sure.
Everyone needs.
Aaron, I just want to break in for a moment, because we're looking at live pictures in the air over Tel Aviv, and obviously, as many people know, or maybe don't know, there is an Iron Dome that Israel uses as its missile defense system, and we're seeing it working now. But in some places, an instant buy for me, I would appreciate it, because I do want to bring in NBC News military analyst Colonel Steve Warren to talk more.
Before this conflict started, there were already issues on this route, so that's why they were looking for alternatives. But right now, those alternatives are not ready. Therefore, this is going to become a much bigger problem. So, and this is also hitting the financial institutions. So, countries like Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, who actually promised to invest billions and billions of dollars. So then now they don't have a good defense system. So now they are actually fearing for their life. Mm-hmm. So what we used to kind of see, kind of like many people were jealous of what
they intend to show,
how people live in Dubai. Now those people are finding private jets to escape.
Yeah.
A minimum $250,000 they have to pay for 4 people, and they can find them. So that means defense becomes, again, the center of our life. So if you don't have a good defense system, how much money you have and how you make that is not going to be that important. So this is kind of shaking the entire system it's not just one region. So, well, U.S. got a lot of promises from Gulf countries for their investment. So if all these are being interrupted, oil prices are going to increase. So what's going to happen? So of course, this is not going to stay in the region.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, gas prices by my house already went up about 35 cents. So
when we had COVID, I used to actually take pictures of the gas prices. I didn't start doing that yet. And we were at a very comfortable level, and all of a sudden now those are we're gonna start feeling it, because one of the things expectation was a little bit like, oh, this is going to be in and out type of stuff. That's not what's happening. So I think this, unless something happens right away, the more countries are going to be part of this long term.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's already kind of creeping over here domestically. And whenever tensions seem to escalate in the Middle East, Washington inevitably becomes part of the equation. And some analysts say that the United States faces constant pressure from Israel to confront Iran more directly. Do you think American leadership sometimes gets pushed towards escalation that it might otherwise prefer to avoid, and why do we get involved?
So I talk to so many people regarding this war, and let's just have an open, honest discussion, right? So one of the promises that President Trump ran his campaign was no war. So he didn't want U.S. to be in any other foreign soil.
Well, he just had his peace conference 3 weeks ago.
Right? So when you are doing all these, and we started with a lot of conflicts, the second term of Trump, from that point, is disappointing. Because I could defend Garland, because it's physically so close to us, and then it's the protection of the, our own shipments against Russia and China positioning themselves there. Panama Canal, I had no problem defending him because we built that, and one of the conditions was China or other countries could not have the control, and Panama government failed to do that. So of course we are going to get involved. But this is something that Trump didn't need it, and I still try to find ways to say, why. And one of the things, of course, we need to, all understand the relationship with United States and Israel. And this is one of the closest strategic and military relationships in the world. So it's not just there are similar ones with other countries. It's not. So it's very close. Well, that's because, after Israel, the second highest Jewish population is in the United States, almost 5.7 million people. In Israel, the total population is about 9.2 or 9.8 million. Only 7.2 actually is Jewish population, and we are the second biggest with 5.7 million. So, and this 5.7 million is financially powerful individuals, and they actually control the institutions, and unfortunately they control the Senate and the House of Representatives. So when you look at AIPAC, we see how money is being spent. Even today, I have one of the news. You were not with us at that time with the 2024 elections in Delaware. The New York businessmen sponsored or donate, well, not sponsored, but donate $2 million through one of the PACs to the governor campaign. And today he's back again, this guy, this individual. And because they know that elections are important, and if you are able to control these individuals in the elected offices, then you are going to be able to control the president and the politics, the foreign politics of the country, which I think part of it is what we are seeing. Like, just think about why Tucker Carlson is not able to work in a mainstream media anymore. Megyn Kelly, why is that happening? So why Candace Owens was kicked out of the organization, the media outlet she was part of, is because they don't agree with what's coming out from those, Republican side of the politics, and they want to be able to say what's probably right from their point. So I would not guess Tucker Carlson would be so against President Trump. So, because one of the reasons President Trump probably won the election, is because he had a really good, very strong support from these individuals. So now, when we talk about Tucker Carlson, this is one of the most influential people in media. Megyn Kelly is the same for Republicans. Candace Owens is the same. So the guy who was killed in September,
Charlie Kirk,
he actually was going against this issue of being in a war in Gaza and Iran, in Israel, and he was going anti-Israel, and he got killed. So, and I have, I work on different things, and I went through some of them with a couple of my friends, and also you and I, we talk about it a little bit. So, is this the way of Trump saying that, I don't need to kind of get out of this pressure that I have, so whatever they want, let's just do it and see what happens. So then, because it's, it's very remote from where we are.
Yeah.
So then at least, they will maybe learn their lesson, they being Israel in this case. So because the country that they are messing up is not Colombia or Venezuela, it's like one of the oldest nations in the world. So with 92 million population, you and I, we talk about Ted Cruz not knowing Iran's population, not knowing the population structure with different backgrounds and different beliefs, and what makes these people happy and what doesn't make them happy. Okay, so, and you can make decisions on these without, and then not understanding what's happening with the on the other side, and because they're also pretty closed in. In China, for example, in Russia, you cannot use LinkedIn, just to give you an example.
Yeah.
In China, you cannot use certain, the search engines that we have. You cannot use them because they know that they're all being influenced by whoever is controlling them. And then China says, well, you don't really need to see that.
Right.
Here's, and how I learned that LinkedIn not being available in Russia was last year when I was in Utah for one of the conferences. I thought, we don't do business cards anymore, so I was looking for this guy's LinkedIn, and he said, don't try because we are not on LinkedIn. I'm like, what do you mean you're not on LinkedIn? And he's like, well, in Russia it's not allowed.
Can't do it. Yeah, wow.
So that's because there's a reason. And that reason is not some stupid reason. That's a really important reason. They need to protect their own countries. So with all these, if Trump was forced to do this without agreeing, or did he really make a big mistake? That's also possible. Why that's possible? Because he's a businessman, and he's pretty high strong, very dominant. I mean, many CEOs, people can say similar things for me, but there is a balance. The balance is you need to not lose the reality, and then you need to keep yourself in the, you need to remember that everything that you have today, you can lose tomorrow. So, and some people, they have this power poisoning, I call, that they think that whatever they have today, they're going to be able to keep it forever. I have some business partners who felt the same way and then they're gone is because they have the same attitude. This is the second, scenario that I'm thinking maybe did he really miscalculate this?
Yeah. I think one thing that Trump underestimated was kind of the American public view of the Israeli government. I'm not saying, the people, or the region, but, because of Netanyahu, the controversies that he's had, because of the response to the October 7th attacks, the destruction of Gaza, there's a very negative view, on the Israeli forces, at least within America here. So then for us to immerse ourselves into a war that wasn't even ours, here in America, following in Israel, I think that just changes the public perception where it already started, negatively. The response when we went and picked up Maduro, that was a completely kind of different thing.
But
it's
even
a different
that
region.
we didn't like.
Right.
I mean, yes, it benefited the U.S., but we knew that that wasn't the right way to deal with another country.
Right, and then people kind of genuinely agreed with that. Like, it was Maduro needed to be, taken away, but is really going in and kidnapping a world leader something we should do? And then, we kind of did it again a few weeks later.
When you look at the reason, right, the reason is always oil with these. So, when we were covering Venezuela, I don't know if I mentioned this, but they say, well, U.S. has U.S. has oil as well. Well, true, but it's not the same quality. The grade of the oil is different. So when you get it from Venezuela, and refineries that we have are pretty much able to process much more from that versus what we get here in U.S. It's not the same quality of oil. So we wanted oil, and we, in the old days, we were, I guess, doing this with CIA, like behind the scenes, but now we are doing it openly. But the thing was, it just didn't feel right. So again, like Jordan, no problem. Panama, no problem. But like when you go and then just get someone out of there and not knowing what's going to happen, you make those decisions for people that you don't lead, and do we really not care about anyone else? That's kind of like one of the issues. So if the oil is the problem, can we not get this in a more stable way, with more peaceful way, since we are going to get it from someone anyway?
Yeah.
So can we not build a relationship with Cuba, like, for example, like this is like this little island, right? So why is Russia have more influence in Cuba? Just think about it. So did we lose our ability to build relationships anymore?
Yeah.
So, if we are open for it, because we are the upper hand anyway, so then we should be able to approach and be more constructive with these relationships. So then we don't have to have an island that hates us and trying to align themselves with Russia or China. And we should be able to help these people and better understand them.
Yeah.
So when Sarah McBride, when she was elected, one of the things that I had to brief her about Turkey and President Erdogan, and I said, you cannot just read these countries, these different cultures, with our values here in the United States. So you have to really understand how these people process things, how they think, what's important, what values they have. So we can like easily make fun of our president here, and it would sound funny. On TV, people are doing it. Sometimes we do it here, but it's not okay in Turkish culture. Okay, so then don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't try to tell them that it's okay. Hey, we do it and we are fine. No, that's not our job to change these cultures and societies where, if they want to be part of us, that's one thing, but these are different countries. So you can't change Chinese people, you can't change Russian people, you can't change Filipinos, and just like Japan, everyone needs has their own cultural values. So understanding this, I think what I would have expected from these situations is building better relationships with these countries, because we have to have this trade already. We were looking for stable trade, but now we are creating more trouble.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, outside of the destruction of war, as you just mentioned, there's the huge economic side, that a lot of people around the world are monitoring, not just here in the United States. So if the conflict escalates, which countries or regions would you feel the economic pressure the most? I know you've discussed previously on the show the BRICS economic coalition, which Iran is a part of. China and Russia are also a part of that. So how would that influence that?
So overall, what would have happened to different countries?
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is going to be, when you look at Middle East, one really important one is Russia's involvement, right? So Russia supported Iran and Syria and some other countries there. So the conflict like this, Russia also is a oil producer. So like you would say that from economic standpoint, hey, Russia would benefit from this. Short term, yes. But you also mentioned BRICS, and BRICS is something that we covered from the beginning. Before, no one, in fact, even in my office, people were coming up and saying, hey, why are we even talking about it? Well, because it had a lot of momentum, and then half of the world population, the countries, they were in it.
Wow. Yeah.
And they're still in it. And the idea was, how can they actually change the power of US dollar and make a big impact on global currency? So, Russia is one of the founders of BRICS, and on the short term, yes, Russia would be able to sell more oil, but if you don't have a stable economy from these countries, I think new maybe outlets would be available for those. And long term, I don't know if it's going to really benefit anyone. But the short term, yes, they would be able to sell more. And then now Russia they have Ukraine in their hand, right? So now, Phil, one of the things that's people always miscalculate. If you recall, when Russia-Ukraine conflict started, what were everyone saying? They were saying, hey, Russia was going to go there in and out in a couple of days. They were going to take over and done. Mm-hmm. It's 4 years now.
Yeah.
So, and it's still not close to the end. So these are big miscalculations. And also maybe they set up the expectation in a really wrong way. But 4 years we are still in these wars. So China probably China is so interesting. So they are trying to kind of stay more on the like kind of like a moderator, almost like willing to pitch in and be the middleman, but also they are providing support for the opposition. We now know that China is supporting Iran. China is one of the biggest investors in Africa. Mm-hmm. So it may not be so visible as like, hey, here's how much defense support that we are getting, but those countries are getting those supports. So China probably would benefit from this. Again, all these are short term. So then we have other countries in the region. So we'll probably talk about Turkey a little bit later, but the other thing is that these other Gulf countries, would they really benefit? I don't know. Because right now, this probably has a really big impact on BRICS countries. So now there are 5 founders of BRICS, and then there were 7, I believe, added. They were invited, and then they are now part of the BRICS. And Ethiopia, Egypt, Iran, UAE, they were part of it now. So all these countries are in this conflict, and they don't have any other than Egypt, probably they don't have really good defense system. So they are relying on U.S. to provide them what they need, but I think it may be too late. It's already happening, and it may be too late.
Yeah.
So unless there is a new structure, kind of like taking Iran lightly is a big mistake.
Yeah.
So thinking that if our plan was go there in and out, help Israel, and then 2 weeks later, boom, done. That would be so.
Well, it seems like that's what
true.
their plan was, but I don't know.
Right. But I mean, this is a 92 million population with so many ethnic backgrounds.
Yeah, I think that's something that people don't realize. And as you mentioned, I think some senators don't realize Iran's 3 times the size of Iraq and a lot more populated.
Right. And then their war was more than 10 years last. So this is kind of like overall the oil trade is going to have big impact. Some countries are going to benefit from it, some are not. But I think every time you put tension on the existing setting, those countries who are selling or who are buying, they will find new alternatives. Yeah. So that's probably what's going to happen.
So I'm gonna skip ahead here to my 6th question, and then we'll come back to Turkey, just because we touched on it. Talking about Russia and China and their impact. Do you think that Russia and China are worried? We kind of talked about how they might benefit it, and how they might be worried kind of economically, but we've seen examples in the past where instability creates openings. For example, after Syria's political uprising, Russia moved in militarily and expanded its influence there. I think they have the 2nd most bases there outside of Syria, more than the United States. So would a prolonged crisis in Iran create similar opportunities for those countries to come in and create military bases in that region?
So this interruption that we have there now with the oil business and others, right? So one of the things that we look at it, how much this would impact U.S. So we are not really heavily relying on the oil business from there. Other, financial, economic stuff, that's different. But the oil is not main concern for U.S. But it is a main concern for China. So they are getting so much oil from this region, and what's going to happen is if these states are not stable, it will impact their sources. So most likely they will invest more in this area. And I don't think China is going to leave Middle East alone. Yeah. If that's the question. So I don't think Russia is going to leave.
Well, yeah, if we leave it in pieces and then leave out of there, Russia will come in and say, hey, we'll help you rebuild, but we want some things from you.
But I don't think we are going to leave that region either.
Well, shouldn't.
And I don't think our intention was to go there and then just, change everything and then bring democracy. Like I can't even just be sarcastic anymore with this democracy. Like, we don't have democracy. Why would we try to bring somewhere else democracy? Like right now, this conflict, the way that military actions that we have, Congress does not have approval yet. I'm not saying they won't approve it, but they don't today. This is executive order type of activity, and so can you say we have democracy? Like, no. So I mean, we are going to talk about other political issues that we have, which we talked about before. Like, one of the reasons Trump was able to win this election because he had a lot of legal actions against him, and they were all politically motivated ones. That means if you are in charge, if you are in power, if you are if you are in charge of U.S., you are able to influence the court, the judges, and then you can just go after this other person, the opponent in this case, nonstop. And what happens is he wins. Now he's maybe doing the same thing to the other side, right? So not maybe at the same level, but potentially they will, and they can. So can we say this is a really good democracy? I don't think so. And also, like, the state that we live in, our governor was elected with 20% of the population. So 80% didn't care about who the president, who the governor was. So, or maybe they didn't even know to go and vote, or maybe who knows. So, when 85, 90% turnout is not happening in elections, I don't think we can call that democracy overall.
So, as you touched on, one country that sits right at the crossroads of these geopolitical dynamics, and which one that has a very serious personal interest to you, is Turkey. Where does Turkey stand in all this, and does this conflict create risks for Ankara, and how would Iran directly attacking Turkey affect this conflict?
So Turkey's biggest luck probably is President Erdogan. So domestically, on domestic policies, people may criticize him, fine, but these issues, the running a country is not just like the domestic issue. So you have to, just like what happened in Dubai is, one of my friends is there, and then one of my family members' daughter is there, and they are helpless. So they could have said, hey, look how good we live, and today they cannot defend themselves. That means they didn't invest in their defense system at all. And some other countries, larger, bigger, more powerful, just can come and invade them, which is what's happening right now. So Turkey invested heavily on their defense system, and he got a lot of criticism from the opposition, and today everyone is thanking him. So I read some messages from the left side of the Turkey politics, and they are like, they try not to directly thank him, but they are thanking, okay, glad Turkey is in this position to kind of say, no, we are not, like, you can't really attack us, because they're powerful enough to not to be bullied by Iran or other countries.
Well, and they have the unique position of the countries in that region that they're a NATO member. And
It's
so
a
if
NATO
Iran
member.
were to directly attack Turkey, it would be an attack on NATO, which would get other countries involved.
That is, that's true, but also that makes Turkey the target as well.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest Air Force bases for United States is in Turkey, and that's the only one that they didn't attack. So that's because Turkey's power is pretty clear. So then Iran knows that if they hit Turkey, they can, they have a bigger problem in their hand. Now here's what may happen. Israel may just have a false flag and then just hit the US base in Adana and get Turkey in this crisis. Possible, which they tried with. We know that one is in South Cyprus, and one in was going through the Turkish air space. So, and what if that happens? So this is why this conflict is so fragile, in a way that it can just become a huge war that we won't be able to control at some point. So now, what would Turkey do from this point? If you remember, Ukraine and Russia, Azerbaijan and Armenian, and the conflict in Africa and Syria. Turkey is kind of like the trusted, kind of like the judge, almost like people mediator. So then countries are comfortable having Erdogan at the table, and then they know that he's going to be fair and objective. So he got that respect, he earned that respect. So, and I think he's managing this as good as it can be. So problem is there are a lot of unknown entities in this, and if there is one false flag operation, and if Turkey is put into a position where they have to kind of respond, things can escalate very quickly.
Yeah. You said that so well. I was thinking the same thing. I mean, yeah, Turkey's so uniquely positioned. It's kind of a bridge between Europe and Asia, and as you said, they've always kind of been a diplomatic mediator. Amongst a lot of the conflict there, kind of brings stability to the region. But like you said, all it takes is one misfired missile or one purposely, fired missile, and
So-
this whole war could completely change.
Absolutely. Like being fair and being objective and trying to have empathy is important when we are dealing with the others. Like any agreement requires for us to understand what other side needs to have. So if this is just a pure trade, when you are trying to get something, like let's say we do billing services, right? So we change our billing fee and then cut it by half. Great for the short term, but then longevity of that is not going to be there. So then those clients will be looking for alternatives in 12 months because we can't run, like sometimes like there's a British old saying that, I'm not too rich to buy cheap, like something like that. So so then when it's cheap, you know that you are going to buy it twice. So meaning if you are getting a really incredible deal from the other side and that weakens the other side's position, that other side won't be there, so then you won't be able to get this from them anymore. So you need to look at it long term. I think President Erdogan is looking at these things long term, and the relationship with Iran is an interesting one because like people may think that just because they are both Muslim countries, they are the same. They're not. So one of them is Shias and the other one's Sunnis, and the tension between those two is almost like the tension is in Israel with Gaza. So same, like it's almost like if they are from a different religion, or they are seeing Turkey as like if Turkey was Christian versus now Sunni Muslims majority, doesn't make any difference to Iran.
No. Yeah.
So, but we manage that relationship. Well, it's a neighbor. So, if neighbor is not stable, there will be more neighbors in that same country. Like it's going to be split. Like what happened in Libya, in Iraq, and Syria. Like this, you get rid of one country, but then you have multiple little countries, and dealing with those are more difficult than dealing with one stable country. So that's kind of what probably Erdogan's plan is, but I guess we'll see that in time.
Yeah, we certainly hope for peace and safety for everyone in Turkey there. But as we look at these moving pieces, alliances, economics, global powers, question many people are asking is how easily this could spiral into something much larger, like we just mentioned. It could just take flip of a switch. So in your view, what is the single most realistic, dangerous scenario that would really kind of turn this confrontation into a full-on regional war? Would it be attacking a NATO country or just...
Well, it's so easy to get to that. That's the scary part. It's so easy to have this escalate, which already, like when we say escalate from where we are, so if thousands of people died already, it's already too late. We have to kind of keep that in mind. But then now this becomes how close we are to a much bigger worldwide maybe conflict is just one false flag or one maybe not false flag, and then some wrong decision, some desperate decision. So one thing is important, which I also didn't understand. Well, of course, we are not talking to President Trump on a daily basis. So when you get rid of the entire leadership in Iran, well, I have to remind people, like, this is a 92 million population, so it's not relying on 10 or 12 people's leadership, so they can easily produce their new leader very quickly, especially in this situation like this. But getting rid of the leadership, wasn't that a huge mistake that now you don't have a counterpart to talk to? Right. So wouldn't you think that, hey, well, if I have their existing leader, so we can actually negotiate maybe.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't happen. So you took that out. So now there are multiple military groups. They act independently from the central military because they don't have a leader. So some of the attacks that we are seeing from Iran to Israel is coming from those entities. So they are not getting, like, if maybe their Khamenei was there, maybe he was going to say, don't do it, or maybe don't hit this country or that, but that's not going to happen now because they're angry. So I'm from that region, so I probably can say this, so it wouldn't be racist. So Middle Easterns are not easy to deal with. So it's not. So their pride is really huge for them, and therefore, if you try to hurt that, they can become really aggressive. And I think that's what we are going to see more and more if we don't stop this war. And I think U.S. can stop this war, and U.S. President Trump should stop this war like today, because I think it's going to hurt a lot more people. Again, we were talking about like Turkey getting 1 missiles in their soil. That's now Turkey times not NATO, and that becomes already a huge issue. If one Chinese ship is being bombed by Israel, there we go. So then Russia and all these, and what if Iran is doing something crazy? So what if they hit? What if they really have nuclear power? Now, one of the reasons that we have all these problems is because we were told that in 2025, with the operations that we have at 12 days, the issue was, hey, we took out their nuclear power potential, potential, so that the facilities are gone. So we cleaned it up, so we are good. Then, now we are in this war again. What is the reason, right? So now Iran may actually have like a major strike on water sources. That's one of the issues, because that area, again, they heavily rely on water from 1 or 2 sources. So once you hit that, now you are looking at a humanitarian type of an issue, while we right now have this like bombing from one side to the other. But then once people are not able to get clean water, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
So this craziness needs to stop.
Yeah.
And I think President Trump can do this. So and if U.S. doesn't stop, I don't think it's going to stop. So that's why I'm saying that U.S. can stop this war by stopping. So,
and I think another important distinction is, Iran is an Islamic theocracy. So, the political leaders are also religious leaders.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like, if Trump were taken out of office because people didn't like what he did, they put in a Democrat, someone still part of the government, but a different viewpoint. Many of the citizens of Iran have the same, religious view as the government. And so while
it's almost like killing the Pope for Christians.
Right. So it's not so easy to just replace it with a new regime when many of the people who live there practice the same religion that you just decapitated.
Absolutely. So, this, the way that media covers these, and sometimes I'm like, give me a break. Like, please, like, don't assume that, like, I'm talking about the media, assume that we are just stupid. Like, people in Iran, if they want something different, trust me, they will get it.
Yeah.
They don't need anyone. They can do it. So if they're happy with what they have, so you can't tell Shia Muslim to change their beliefs, because they will be happier with this way, right? So stop.
Yeah.
Like, just stop, because if you don't, then you are going to have a bigger problem, and you can't do it anyway. But then, is Libya in a better position now than when Gaddafi was there?
I don't think so.
Like, everyone had a free home.
Yeah.
Everyone had free education, healthcare. Well, he was a dictator with our standards, but from their standards, our president also is a dictator.
Mm-hmm.
So from their domain, with their values.
Yeah.
So it's like, why do I care if they're happy? So now what happened in Libya? Who's in charge? Is there a country? No, there are like 3-4 different groups. They're just fighting each other. And the England's UK bank stole 300 billion of Gaddafi. Like, this is, we have to just be more straightforward. So I don't like when people are pretending.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the biggest thing of this, and I think that's what people are concerned about, is that we don't make the mistakes that we did in Iraq, and like you said, we were there for 10 plus years. And is it in any better position? Is Afghanistan in any better position? Is Libya in any better position? So are we just repeating those mistakes? And so certainly it's something that we hope that we can do it correctly this time, if we haven't already screwed it up. So while global tensions are dominating international headlines, there's also a story here in the United States that continues to resurface in the public conversation. That's the ongoing fallout from the Epstein case. This week, it returned to the issue with reports about depositions involving former President Bill Clinton. So when you look at the Epstein case, you see connections to billionaires, intelligence circles, royalty, and now, as we see, political leaders, including Bill Clinton. Epstein is dead. Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison. But many of the people who have interacted with Epstein, as we've seen come out in these files, remain untouched. So is Epstein essentially the fall guy for a much larger elite network? And realistically, do you think the public will ever see consequences for the powerful individuals who were part of that circle?
There's a lot of questions there. So, but you just said something that Epstein is dead. Well, we don't know that.
Yeah, that's true.
So what's reported to us is, and then the
Allegedly.
clip of that, he may be killed and dead, or he may be kidnapped and killed, and then he may be able to escape. So that's something that we need to kind of still probably keep it in gray, because I know he didn't kill himself.
Mm-hmm.
That I know, just like my gut feeling. But I don't know if he's killed or if he was able to escape. So that is like, anyone believe in a different way, they are kind of going for the easy way on this one. So now, what's interesting, and this is what I love about this country, and some say this way or that way, but we have two very dominant politicians. One of them is the former president, and one of them is the former Secretary of State, she was, and the senator. They were on a deposition. He's 80 years old. They were in a deposition. He's 80 years old. His health is not probably in great shape. Now, let me ask you a question. I know we don't rehearse these this way. Or I don't know if Ethan, you saw the video, because I did talk to him, so he may be influenced by me. So I don't want, but he'll be.
Bill Clinton one?
Did you feel a little bit sorry for him when you saw his hand being like shake, like when he was?
I don't know if I felt sorry. I'll be honest. I don't. Yeah.
What about you?
I wouldn't say I felt sorry, because you know why he's there. But yeah, I mean, it's part of you, like,
I can't say the same thing for Hillary.
What are they going to do? Throw him in prison? Like, he's just going to,
Right, but I can't say the same thing for Hillary Clinton. But for Bill Clinton, when I saw that, I was a little bit sad, not because I believe that he's not guilty. That's not the issue. But for a former president being in that position and shaking, and he'll probably get some sympathy from people.
It takes like the shine and mystique of, a president, and you just makes him look human, like a normal everyday citizen there, sitting there getting deposed by lawyers.
It's been aired at the same time, so we can see right away what's happening, and not being blocked or censored. So we saw everything, and I think that's still one of the greatest things in this country. As long as this is not a political weapon that it's being utilized. So, and I don't think in this case is the case, because we know Clinton's reputation. I think he has sex addiction. So, and that doesn't change with the age, unfortunately, because it's a psychological disease or psychological condition, mental illness, whatever you want to call. But us being able to do this deposition, not to worry about his age, not to worry about his former position, I think it's very powerful. Now, your question about the network is not Epstein. Network is a very well operated with a very big foundation of a Mossad type of operation financed by Israel, and it's like everyone is in there. So you have politicians, you have celebrities, you have Harvard's presidents.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even for us here, we are trying to get UD's president for our show. We still didn't get a response back. This guy is taking the Harvard's president to the island. So, and being involved. So that's not easy. Like, being able to do that, that's because they have money. Like, the money needs to be coming from just open source. So if you have open source money, you don't have to worry about the accountability and how it's being spent, unlimited. So you can do those things, and he did. So, not he did, but this organization that he belonged did this. So, and therefore, there is more things that's going to come out, and we are already seeing what has been out there. We are seeing the results and consequences of those, and we'll be seeing more of those.
Yep.
But there are also files that's not being published.
Well, one of those files that a lot of people were clamoring to see was reported testimony against Donald Trump. And so last night the Department of Justice released some of those additional redacted files. One, as I mentioned, made allegations against Donald Trump from the 1980s. Now those claims have never been verified. Trump has said he didn't know Epstein during that time, and no charges have ever come from those statements. But in an era where allegations, documents, and partial records can instantly go global, with social media and everything like that, everybody's already seen them by this morning. The release of material like this kind of brings us closer to transparency and truth, but it also risks turning serious allegations into political weapons that ultimately erode trust in institutions and leaders. Again, to kind of follow up to what we talked about before, there are these ring of peoples that have been mentioned, and I think some of them did do serious crimes, but there's other people who are mentioned, who didn't do anything. They're just kind of mentioned in there, but just having their name mentioned, and Trump's name being mentioned in this way, and she describes this sexual act, is he already guilty by public jury, whether it's ever proved or not?
So, what we have been saying, just someone's name being on these files doesn't mean that that person is guilty. So we cannot have an exception. So this cannot be, we cannot have President Trump as an exemption of this. If that is true, that he's not involved and there's nothing else is happening, there are others who are in the same situation who's just, we talk about it, right? So Epstein is a really crazy record keeper. So he sends an email to himself to document something, and we don't know if the other person did or did not, but he's saying that I had this happened with this person on this day. So what's
Right.
that?
Yeah.
But that email is there. So the former foreign minister of Turkey, he's saying that he met him twice, but there is no validation on the other side whether or not that happened. So then, if we have access to that, we cannot have, we cannot separate some files just because that's a double standard.
And I don't think they need to be separated, not paying any mention to them, but it becomes part of the partisan narrative. Democrats will call Trump a pedophile, and again, maybe it's true, but to this point, there's no evidence that proves that. But that's what his call to, and people will send vitriol and hate because nobody likes a pedophile.
And I've been saying that, right? So I've been saying that if we haven't seen anything. In fact, what we know is Epstein doesn't like Trump. They don't have a good relationships. He always supported Democrats on every election. Like 97% of his donations, political donations, are for Democrats. And we know from the existing files that he went after President Trump. So now when I've been saying this very comfortably, and then saying that, hey, there isn't anything, this name is not involved in any ways. So when you publish 3.5 million documents, and then we now find out that there's something that was not published and they kept it, now guess what happens? My trust system.
Well, people are going to ask, well, why didn't you publish those ones? If you published all the other ones, why didn't you do these? What's
my
wrong
trust,
with those?
like the transparency, like you cannot have little bit of transparency. It's like, oh, this is enough for Ethan or this is enough for Phil. No, if we say our agreement is fully transparent, then you know our doctors, if they're on production for United Medical, they have access to our billing system directly, so they can see what they build and what's being collected. Now, let me just give you this kind of analogy. If I tell the doctors, hey, you are on this production and we are going to provide these reports for you, reports coming from QuickBase. So, I mean, people who are not from United Medical may not understand this analogy, but try to follow. So then doctor is on production based on their collection, and then I'm not giving them the details of their reports. And I say, hey, just trust me. And here's the report that we have from the other source, QuickBase. So do you think that doctor would be fully trust you? No. Would that relationship work? No. The reason I have relationships with these physicians for 25, 26 years in the same setting is because we trust each other, and that trust is not granted, it's earned. So earning is being able to follow what you agree. So if we have the agreement of transparency, I need to be able to see everything. So you can't just kind of discriminate one group to the other in this. So I still believe that Trump is not in these Epstein issues because it just doesn't make sense. But now it's creating more questions, and now probably Democrats are going to hit him harder because something is being hidden. So that's the trust. Like the trust is now shaken. So people who are supporting him are going to have difficult time to support him. So that's kind of like one of the issues that I have with that.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty clear from both these issues, the geopolitical tension in the Middle East and the ongoing questions surrounding the Epstein case. It really kind of shows how complicated today's political and global landscape has become. And that's not a question, that is a statement. So I will turn it back to you for your final thoughts.
So we conclude our discussions today. It's important for us to remember that these conflict like this is happening between Iran and Israel. Rarely exists in isolation. This is going to become a major event in the society that we live in, and the way that what we have seen in the history, these things can escalate very quickly, often producing other consequences far beyond what was calculated in the beginning. So what we are looking for is this is a real challenge for countries who are involved, but I believe United States has the upper hand and President Trump has the upper hand to stop this war, because the other thing is that 80% of this population doesn't support the war, and like his best advocates don't support this war. So what we know is this is not a popular military action. So nothing is going to make this look better because more people are dying. And we are in healthcare, and when we try to do care coordination and prevention and trying to have more quality of life, better quality of life and longer lifespan, so then also seeing people being killed for no reason, that is the huge issue that we are actually dealing with. And I think President Trump needs to take an ownership of this and stop this madness before we have more casualties. So thank you for joining us, and I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation. We'll be back with more updates next week. We have one of our local state senators, and the following week our Wilmington City Mayor John Carney, and right after that Brian Townsend, as the majority leader, will be with us. We'll be talking about some of these issues with them, and as well as the local updates that we have from Delaware politics. Well, until next week, stay united. Bye-bye.